Good Wednesday evening to you. It's Pastor Marty here at Cedar Grove Baptist Church. We want to welcome you to our Wednesday night Bible study. And before we do that, I would like to just have a time of prayer. We still have several people in our church that need prayer. Catherine and Travis, they stand in need of our prayer continually. They've had a little setback. Also, continue to remember my wife, please. She's still recuperating from her injuries, and she's doing much better, but we still covet your prayers. Also, we have my brother-in-law, his oldest daughter, her name's Chrissy. She is looking at some serious surgery in the days ahead, and so I just ask that you'd pray for that whole family, that God would touch them. And then just remember our kids, our young people, our teenagers. I watched some teenagers and preteens over the weekend in my neighborhood, and these kids are bored out of their mind because of what's going on in their world. They don't have any structure, and I know that that may not resonate with some people, but they just don't have any structure right now. And so we just need to pray for our young people, that they'll stay safe and out of trouble, and soon their life will get back to normal and that kind of thing. And then we just have many, as Brother Bill says, that just need prayer. And so we just ask that you pray for each other. So let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, we want to thank you for this day. I just thank you for who you are and all that you do for us. Father, I pray that you touch each one of these people that are standing in need of a healing touch. I ask that you be with them. Those that are needing a mental touch, I pray that you be with those as well. Father, I pray that you heal our nation. It just stands in need of a mighty move of God. It's so divided. Lord, I just pray that you minister to our nation. And then, Father, I ask that you just help us as a church to walk with you. I pray that you help us to honor you, and not just us, but Father, I pray that you just be with all the men of God who are pastoring churches in these very unusual times. I ask that you just give them wisdom as they try to guide the fellowship where you have them leading. Now, Lord, again, we just ask that you touch Cedar Grove in a mighty way in our community. Father, help us in our time of study tonight. We ask that in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of walk through chapter 25 of the book of Acts. And this particular chapter, I think it is. I think it's important. It's not really exciting. There's some things happening, but it's not really that exciting compared to some other chapters. But I do think that you'll find some information there of great value. So I want to start in verse 27 of chapter 24, because that was where we actually kind of turned the page on Felix. So verse 27 says, "But after 2 years," very important, "Porcius Festus came to Felix's room." So Paul has been in jail, so to say, for 2 years because Felix just couldn't get a bribe. Okay, and Felix, willing to show the Jews pleasure, left Paul bound. So he just kept him locked up. You know, I don't care what's right or what's wrong. I'm just going to keep him locked up. So these Jews, I have a little card that I can play with them if they get upset with something. I can say, well, look what I've done for y'all. You know, I've kept your enemy bound. So starting in chapter 25, verse 1, "Now when Festus was come into the province, after 3 days, he ascended from Caesarea to Jerusalem." So again, we talked about that last week, how if you're up in Jerusalem, you descend everything else because Jerusalem is higher than anything around it. So you ascend up to Jerusalem, you descend all the the places around there. But I want you to notice he was only there 3 days. 3 days. That shows the power that the Jewish religious leaders had and carried in this particular day in that area. The people that came to rule in that area knew they had to keep them happy, because if they stayed happy, the providence stayed quiet. They could control the people. Okay, so he goes up 3 days. First thing he does, I moved into my house. I've had a good meal. I'm getting my suitcase packed. I'm going to Jerusalem. All right. Verse 2. Then the high priest and the chief of the Jews informed him against Paul. So he's before the Sanhedrin, basically. He's meeting with him. And besought him and desired favor against him, talking about favor against Paul, that he would send for him to Jerusalem. Now there's a little, like a parenthesis, laying in wait for him to kill him. So there's this little parenthesis that they sent for him. They wanted him to go to Jerusalem, but they were going to set a trap to actually attack and kill Paul. They had, again, these assassins that we've already talked about. These assassins were going to be there ready to kill him. Isn't that something? I mean, just think about this. Just think about this picture. Here this man is, who is a Jewish zealot. I mean, he was being groomed for the Sanhedrin. He's been converted. They cannot argue against him. I mean, he's just able to take them apart because of the power of God and because of his knowledge. He's able to take them apart. They can't trap him up. And they followed him all over Asia Minor. And they're trying their best to kill him then. And they still want to kill him after 2 years. He's been locked up. I mean, people nowadays don't get locked up for murder that long. And yet they're still angry with him. All right. But Festus answered that Paul would be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself would depart shortly thereafter. And so basically Festus is wanting to put on his robes and stand before Paul before he decides to do anything. But I want you to look what happens now. Verse 5. Let them therefore, said he, which among you are able, go down with me and accuse this man, if there be any wickedness in him. So he's saying, look, y'all going to have to get all your witnesses together and send them down to me, to my judgment seat. And when he had tarried among them more than 10 days, 10 days, he went down to Caesarea, and the next day, sitting in the judgment seat, commanded Paul to be brought. So now, he spends 10 days in Jerusalem. He had just took this post, spent 3 days at home, and 10 days in Jerusalem. That ought to tell you something. And no doubt they've been whining and dining him. They have tried their best to manipulate him and get him in their camp. And I guarantee you there has been some bribes and promises made right here. Let me stop and say this. The Roman government, the ancient Roman government, is where we basically get our government from the United States, where we get ours and others get theirs from. The ancient Roman Empire crumbled and went into ruins, but in the last days, in the time of the tribulation, that Roman Empire is going to be revived. Okay, it will be revived, and much speculation about what's going to happen and all that kind of stuff, but it will be revived. But even today, we can see just the corruption that has followed from the ancient times, even to today, in our government, in our judicial system. I just watched a video that you could take stock in, or you cannot take stock in. That's completely up to you. But this guy was talking about Epstein and how Epstein had been in trouble before, and how basically, he was able to stay at his house for 12 hours a day during his prison sentence. Wow. 12 hours a day. You just went to prison to sleep, and then you go home and you eat, and you visit your friends, and you swim in your swimming pool and play on your computer. And your wife comes or whatever, over to that. I mean, man, what a tough life. And we see it with Lori Loughlin. Here this lady is, because she's powerful, she's broken the law, she gets to pick what prison she wants to go to. I don't know anybody that's ever get to pick what prison they go to. Matter of fact, I know some people, I'm acquainted with them, a few years ago was arrested and convicted in Lexington in Davidson County, and they actually sent some of them as far away as Phoenix, Arizona. I mean, how corrupt is the system when the rich people get to pick where they want to go pull their time and how they pull it? If I had to pull time, I want to do it in Hawaii on the beach. Okay, that's crazy. But again, we have two different systems: one for the wealthy and one for those that have been ruled, if you would. Okay, and you can like that, or you can send some comments or whatever, but that's just the way it is. And so they come down, and verse 7, and when he was come, the Jews which came down from Jerusalem stood about and laid many grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. That is a very important key phrase. They have not been able to prove anything against Paul thus far. So verse 8, while he answered for himself, so Paul didn't have a lawyer, he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews. So he says, I've not done anything against the Jewish law. I've not broken the Sabbath. I've not broken anything else that the Jewish people are over. Neither against the temple. So he says, I didn't go up and defile the temple with a Gentile. I didn't defile the temple with my own presence. I had purified myself after the manner of the Jews. I am 100% Jewish. I went into the temple like I should be able to go. So I haven't done anything against the temple. Nor yet against Caesar. I haven't broken any Roman laws. Okay? Have I offended in anything at all? So Paul is just saying, I am completely innocent of everybody's charges. But Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure, answered Paul and said, Will thou go to Jerusalem, and there be judged of these things before me? So he says, okay, let me get out of Caesar's seat, and I'll go sit in the religious seat, which is actually under Caesar's seat in this day and time. Now, Paul's already said, hey, look, I haven't broken any laws. All right? And I'm before a higher court. Why should I go anywhere else? I haven't broken any laws. And so he asked him, he said, will you do that? And again, I can't help but to think that there's bribery going on right here. Because it says he's willing to do the Jews a pleasure. He's wanting to make them happy. Verse 10. Things is getting ready to change. Then said Paul, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, the highest seat in the land, because they've already judged me there and they found nothing wrong with me. Now they brought me to Caesar's seat, where I ought to be judged. So again, he's saying, this is the place where I ought to be judged because I've done nothing wrong religiously. To the Jews, I've done no wrong, and he takes it a step further, and you very well know that. Okay. So again, Paul's saying, we're just having a Mickey Mouse court. Y'all are just going to keep running around till y'all find something that somebody agrees with. And he says, I'm not guilty. So Paul does this. For if I be an offender or have committed anything wrong worthy of death, I refuse not to die. But if there be none of these things wherefore these accuse me, no man may deliver me unto them. So he's saying, you do not have the right, you crooked stick, to send me back to them. You don't have that right because I'm a Roman citizen. All right. He says, I appeal to Caesar. Now, this is the Caesar Octavian. Okay. This is the Caesar of this who's ruling Rome at the time. But I want you to look now. Festus is not done. Festus is showing just how crooked he is and how conniving he is. Then Festus, verse 12, when he conferred with council, so he didn't just say, okay, well, we'll send you to see. He's still trying to send him back to the Jews. Hast thou appealed to Caesar? Unto Caesar you'll go. Okay. Now, some interesting things happen. There's some interesting people that come. We're not going to handle this trial that he's getting ready, or this, it's not really a trial, this hearing that he's getting ready to have. But I do want to talk about these people and what goes on right here. Verse 13, and after certain days, King Agrippa and Bernice came into Caesarea to salute Festus. So they came by to see him. Now this is Herod Agrippa II. He is the last of the ruling Jewish kings. Now it is important to know that Beatrice, or Bernice, not Beatrice, Bernice is his sister. Not his wife, not his concubine, but his sister. All right. And it's also important to know that he ruled in Palestine, but he did not rule Judea. He was over Chalcis, which is kind of a Greek thing. It's a different area. So he's not over Judea, so he's not over that particular region, so he has no jurisdiction there. He's just visiting. All right. But he is higher in rank than Festus is. Okay. So he comes, he salutes Festus, verse 14. And when they had been there many days, so he's been there a while, Festus declared Paul's cause unto the king, saying, there's a certain man left in bonds by Felix. So he says, Felix left this guy. Now the reason he is conferring with Herod Agrippa here is because he is Jewish. He understands the law. And he didn't just become King Herod Agrippa II overnight. He's worked his way up, and so he's dealt with these things. And so he's asking his advice because he's saying, man, this guy has appealed to Caesar, and basically, I have nothing to say to Caesar. And I'm like, I'm going to look like a monkey if I don't have something to tell Caesar. You know, I'm liable to lose my position myself, so can you help me out? That's basically what he's doing. This stuff is corrupt. And so he tries to make himself innocent to start with. He says, you know, he was left in bonds by Felix. I inherited this problem. Can you help me fix it? He didn't tell him he'd been dating the Jews for the past 2 or 3 months to try to see if they could find something wrong with him. About whom, when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priest and the elders of the Jews informed me, desiring to have judgment against him. So they told me about him. They knew about him. That's the first thing they wanted to talk about. Verse 16. To whom I answered, it is not the manner of the Romans to deliver any man to die before that he which is accused have the accusers face to face, and have license to answer for himself concerning the crimes laid against him. Okay? Now, it is real interesting that he don't explain to him how I tried to send him back to Jerusalem. Okay? He don't explain that part of it. He's saying, I told him he's a Roman citizen, and as a citizen of Rome, your accuser's got to be face to face. You got to go to Jerusalem. You got to come down to Caesarea and stand before Caesar's seat. All right, verse 17. Therefore, when they came on tomorrow, without any delay. So they come on. On the morrow I sat in judgment seat and commanded the man to be brought forth, against whom, when the accusers stood up, they brought none accusation of such things as I supposed. So in other words, they didn't bring anything of the Roman law against him. That is what he's explaining there. All right, verse 19. They had certain questions against him of their own superstitions about the religion, and of one Jesus whom was dead, whom Paul affirmed to be alive. And because I doubted of such manner of questions, I asked whether he would go to Jerusalem and there be judged of these matters. So he says, I see it as a religious thing. I don't see it as, they didn't accuse him of Roman stuff. Why? I don't understand why he's here. I don't believe in this stuff, somebody being alive that was dead, that we executed. So, I just go send him back, and he wouldn't go. But when Paul had appealed to reserve unto a hearing in Augustus, I commanded him to be kept till I might send him to Caesar. So he says, I'm keeping him. Verse 22. Then Agrippa said to Festus, I would also hear the man myself. Tomorrow, said he, thou shalt hear him. And on the morrow, when Agrippa was come with Bernice, with great pomp. Again, I'm telling you, these people put on their big fluffy hats and their big fluffy clothes because they don't have anything else to do. And they've got to show their authority. And so he comes with much pomp, just like Festus did. And when he was entered into the palace of hearing, the chief captains and the principal men of the city, at Festus' commandment, Paul was brought forth. And so everybody's showing their authority. Everybody's out. It's a big parade. Yeehaw, yeehaw. Got the streamers and the balloons. And so they bring Paul out. Verse 24. And Festus said to King Agrippa, and all men which were present with us. And so here again, we see Luke using the personal pronoun us. So Luke's present. You see this man about whom all the multitude of Jews have dealt with me, both at Jerusalem and also here, crying that he ought not to live any longer. So he's saying they're asking for his death sentence. But when I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death, and that he himself had appealed to Augustus, Caesar, I have determined to send him. So I'm going to send him. Of whom I have no certain thing to write unto my Lord. So he says, I don't know what to tell Caesar. I don't know why I'm telling him that I'm going to waste his time. Okay. Therefore, I have brought him forth before you, and especially before the old King Agrippa. So he's brought him before all of the chief rulers, but Agrippa as well, that after examination that I might have somewhat to write. So he's trying to cover his own hiney right here. He's saying, I've done everything I know to do. I inherited this problem. I've tried to do it, but I don't know what to tell Caesar why I'm wasting his time. Hopefully y'all can come up with something, and if not, y'all can at least stand and witness that I done everything I could to keep from wasting his time. Verse 27. For it seemeth to me reasonable to send a prisoner, not without a signify the crimes laid against him. So he's saying again, I don't want to waste Caesar's time not having a portfolio of things charged against this man. So we see this Mickey Mouse court, and again, it just reminds us so much of the hoopla that goes on in our own day in the court system. Our court systems are clogged up with garbage. It just is. And I'm going to say this, and this may not please everybody, and that's okay. But, I heard a comedian years ago said, 3 men enter into a bank on a Friday evening, and a teller sets off a silent alarm. 500 police officers converge on the place. Every news media outlet from CNN to local news is there filming it. There's a standoff for 24 hours. The people finally give up, and there's 3 men with masks and guns and empty bags that they bring out, and they call them the alleged bank robbers. Now, these are the people that robbed the bank, or attempted to rob the bank, and held people hostage. These people, we need to send them to a court system. We don't need to hear why you needed the money. We don't need to hear whose idea it was. We don't need to hear you robbed the bank or attempted to. Okay? That's armed robbery. That's mandatory 7.5 years in the state of North Carolina. All right? Guess what? Adios. 7.5 years. I mean, that's all we need. But we're in a court system. Lord, my mama spanked me when I was 3, and I'm still scarred for life. Oh, yeah. Well, you go to counseling. You go to this. And it's just a money grab for lawyers, crooked lawyers. I'm not saying all lawyers are crooked, but it's just a money grab. And we're supposed to have quick and speedy justice. They were too. And there's nothing being quick or speedy about Paul's justice. Again, we see just the same stuff today that Paul dealt with. When we come back next week, we will actually explore Agrippa as he examines Paul. It's real interesting. I mean, it is real interesting and eye-opening. So I hope you come back next week. And until then, I hope that God richly bless you. Good night.